Another great one was the Our Lady Peace guys. Smashing Pumpkins were out on tour with Jane's Addiction, and Jane's Addiction had a COVID emergency crisis where a bunch of guys in the camp got COVID and they had to cancel. So Our Lady Peace got a phone call on Thursday, before a show that was on like Monday, saying, hey, can you guys hop on this tour and support Smashing Pumpkins for the next 5 days, while the Jane's Addiction camp, recuperates and gets themselves back together. Which led to me getting a phone call Thursday night from John Morley, who was their tour manager, saying, hey, can you come do this gig? And unfortunately, I wasn't actually able to. So I had said, no, but, here's a list of guys that I think could do it, and then I kind of put it out of my head. But then Sunday night, the phone rings again, probably about like 6 at night. And it's John. He's like, hey, the guy that we had that was going to come in, he bailed too. What can I do to convince you to come out and do this gig? It's like, okay, well, look, let me make a few phone calls and see if I can push a few things around. It was more of a personal commitment that I had than a professional one that had prevented me. So I went to my wife kind of with my hat in my hand and went like, geez, like these guys are really stuck. And luckily she's pretty understanding most of the time, except when I kind of put her behind the 8 ball like this. And she said, yeah, sure, man. Like, yeah, we don't want our friends to have any problems. And so James Forsyth, who has, been with the band as Steve Mazer and before him, like Turner's guitar tech for, like 25 years, who had fallen ill. Hopefully at the airing of this, he's doing better. He called me and was like, all right, like I'll meet you at the band's lockup and we'll go through everything. And it was basically like their entire regular touring crew was unavailable. And John, who was their tour manager, had kind of pulled as many favors as he could to get people from here and there. So, he was able to convince Andy DeVoe to come in and do it. And a different monitor engineer and all these different people. And luckily, like Canada, there's an environment amongst professionals that work on the other side of the curtain where, like, I'm not your enemy, like sometimes guys can be, I find it's a little more in the US, but it's kind of changing as the generations change, like, oh, this is my gig and I do it my way and I'm not going to show you what I do because you're going to take it from me. That attitude is going away. And the attitude of more like, okay, what can we do collectively to make this as good as it can be? So James was kind enough to, get out of his sick bed and drive down to the band's lockup and walk me through all this gear, and it's like 10 in the morning and I have to be at the Scotiabank Arena at 11:30. And, we're kind of loading gear and he's explaining how things work in this ear, and I'm on the phone with John in the other ear going like, okay, what do we need? And we went down and the band did what real professional bands always do, which is just knock it right out of the park. And it was probably a really interesting and pleasant surprise for an audience that had no idea the Jane's Addiction wasn't showing up until about noon the day of the show. And it was like, by the way, Jane's Addiction isn't going to be here, but here's Our Lady Peace, who came out and then played, like 15 number one hit songs from a 20+ year career. That people are essentially singing the whole time. It was a really great moment. And Jason and Duncan Rain, and specifically because I deal with them the most, Steve Mazer, are just really great guys and true professionals. And Steve's one of those guys where, like, we don't talk often, but when we do, it's like, oh, hey, buddy. Like, there's no pretense, which is fantastic.